Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to explore why cloud technology is, quite frankly, the ultimate business game changer. Now, some people think that you need a deep, highly technical background to understand the cloud, but really, it just requires a new kind of vision. We are going to break down this massive technological shift using some surprisingly simple analogies, so by the end of this, you'll truly understand what it means for the future of your organization. Let's get into it. Okay, let's jump right in with a bit of a brain teaser. What on earth could modern cloud infrastructure possibly have in common with a 15th century printing press? I know, it sounds like a trick question, right? On one hand, you've got these massive, invisible global data networks, and on the other, you have literal heavy metal type stamping ink onto paper.
Well, the answer is that they are both massive paradigm shifts. If you look back through history, innovation doesn't really happen in a straight, predictable line. It comes in these huge, irreversible waves. The printing press totally democratized knowledge. The steam engine radically transformed how we make and move goods. Electricity lit up the world and, eventually gave us the computer. And right now, today, in the 21st century, cloud infrastructure is that exact same kind of breakthrough technology. It is fundamentally changing how humans work and live.
To help us navigate this current wave, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll trace the historical wave, define the cloud using some really simple metaphors, look at a wild, real-world business rivalry, explore the evolution of cloud eras, and finally, show you how to build your own transformation cloud.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the historical wave of transformation.
To really set the stage here, I love this quote from Vint Cerf, who's Google's chief internet evangelist. He points out that leaders don't actually need to know the complex technical depths of how the internet works. I mean, think about it. You don't need to be a professional plumber to know how to use a sink, right? But leaders absolutely must have the vision to use the cloud as an enabling infrastructure. Because failing to understand what these technologies can do for your products or your services, that could literally be a fatal risk to your business.
Moving right along to Section 2. What exactly is the cloud? Let's demystify this.
First off, let's clear something up. The cloud is just a metaphor. There are absolutely no actual clouds involved. It's simply a metaphor for a massive global network of data centers that store and compute information. Today, we're looking specifically at what's called the public cloud, which is basically on-demand computing managed by a third party, like Google Cloud, and shared securely over the internet. This is where my absolute favorite analogy comes in because it brilliantly illustrates the difference. Traditional on-premises infrastructure is kind of like buying land and building your very own expensive power plant. You got to buy all the servers, pay to cool the room, hire the experts, and if you suddenly need more power, well, you have to spend months building an expansion. It's high capital and super slow. The public cloud, on the other hand, is like renting a highly secure, private unit in a luxury apartment building. You get your own locked space, completely hidden from the other tenants, but you get to share world-class amenities like top-tier security and basically unlimited power, all managed by experts. You literally just move in and focus on living.
Now, inside that public cloud apartment building, you've got options. You can choose different levels of service based on exactly what you need. Infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, is like renting an empty apartment. You get the raw space and the utilities, but you've got to bring your own furniture. Platform as a service, or PaaS, is like getting a semi-furnished apartment specifically designed for you to easily host parties. It gives developers an environment to build and deploy apps. And finally, software as a service, or SaaS, is like moving into a fully serviced luxury hotel suite. Everything is totally ready to use on a simple subscription basis.
All right, Section 3, 5 benefits of cloud computing. Why actually make the move into this metaphorical apartment building?
Well, the perks of ditching your own personal power plant are just massive. You get instant scalability without having to go out and buy heavy hardware, plus the flexibility to access your services from anywhere on the globe. It immediately gives your team the agility to launch things faster and test out new ideas in record time. You also gain huge strategic value because the cloud provider is constantly updating the tech behind the scenes, so you never get stuck using obsolete tools. To top it all off, it gives you world-class security and it's incredibly cost-effective. Why? Because unlike an on-premise data center where you're paying for servers even when they're just sitting there sleeping, in the cloud you only pay for exactly what you use.
This brings us to Section 4, Nintendo and Encyclopedia insights. This contrast perfectly highlights what happens when you ignore these kinds of benefits.
Let's look at Nintendo compared to traditional encyclopedia companies. Believe it or not, both of these businesses were actually born from that printing press era.
Nintendo started way back in 1889 making physical playing cards, but as the decades rolled by, they used every single new piece of technology as a tool to advance their business. They went from physical cards to gaming consoles to mobile games like Pokémon Go, and eventually to the cloud-based Nintendo Switch. Meanwhile, what did the Encyclopedia companies do? They rigidly clung to the old tech. They looked at digital media like CD-ROMs and the internet and saw them as threats purely because they were so obsessed with printing heavy, leather-bound books. They entirely missed the digital wave.
So why did Nintendo thrive while those encyclopedia companies totally vanished? It boils down to this. Nintendo survived because they always focused on their why. Their mission was simply to entertain people. If the cloud is the best way to entertain people today, then boom, they use the cloud. The encyclopedia companies got hopelessly stuck on the how. They thought their purpose was manufacturing books, and they completely lost sight of their true mission, which was actually to share human knowledge.
Let's shift gears to Section 5, Evolution of the Cloud Eras. How did we get to where we are today?
You know, cloud adoption didn't just happen overnight. It evolved a lot like a biological organism adapting to its environment. It kicked off with the VM, or virtual machine cloud era. That was when startups realized, hey, we can just bypass buying hardware entirely. Then came the infrastructure cloud era, where bigger established organizations started migrating their traditional IT just to save some cash. But today we are officially in the transformation cloud era. This is no longer just about saving a few bucks on servers. It's about reinventing how business is done across every single team. It's about building a culture of constant innovation.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 6, Building Your Transformation Cloud. How do you actually pull this off? Based on the biggest hurdles organizations face, you really need a foundation built on 5 main pillars. It starts with unified data. You've got to break down those silos so you can get real-time insights and leverage AI. That data needs to run on an open infrastructure so you don't get trapped by vendor lock-in. You'll definitely need tools for seamless hybrid collaboration, backed by uncompromised trust and security to keep your digital assets safe. And it all needs to be wrapped up in sustainable technology.
And hey, speaking of sustainability, you've got to see this number. Cloud computing is estimated by IDC to save a staggering 1 billion metric tons of CO2 emissions by 2024, compared to traditional on-premises computing. Public cloud data centers are just incredibly energy efficient. So moving to the cloud isn't just a smart IT upgrade, it is a massive, tangible step toward decarbonizing your entire business footprint.
Now, to actually make all this happen, you can use the Google Cloud Adoption Framework. Think of this as your personal map and compass for the journey. You can't just snap your fingers and flip a switch. You really have to look closely at your people, your process, and your technology. This framework helps you assess where you're currently at, map out your tactical and strategic goals, and structure a real, actionable step-by-step program to get your organization exactly where it needs to be.
So we've seen how the cloud is basically our modern-day printing press. It's a paradigm shift that changes absolutely everything about how we work and live. It's the ultimate enabler, but only if you have the vision to see past the nuts and bolts of the tech and focus on your organization's true why. So the only real question left to ask is, are you ready to embrace the cloud and kick off your own digital transformation, or are you going to be left sitting in a dusty warehouse trying to sell leather-bound encyclopedias to a world that has completely moved on?